Hello and welcome to Love Powered. My guest today is Ellie, beautiful new friend that I made recently through my mentor. And Ellie's story resonates with mine in a lot of ways. So I'm excited for us to engage in this conversation and to get to know each other a little deeper and to share with our audience what's truly important for us now to share with the world. Ellie, will you please introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about you and whatever is important for us to know.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here with you. I also have, as I've learned pieces of your story little by little, I've also been very curious to connect, and I'm excited to do that here today. My name is Ellie. As you said, I live in Milwaukee, Wisconsin with my husband and our sweet pup. And I do transformational work, really helping people find their light and rebuild from the inside out after big life losses or really big personal low seasons, so that you can live vibrantly again and really feel connected to life and bring whatever is in your heart out into life again. And I came to this path through my own grief journey and through the long-term illness of my mom with multiple cancer diagnoses starting when I was 8 years old. And then she passed away 3 years ago. So when I was 32. And I didn't know until I was late into my 20s that a lot of the health issues that I had been struggling with, a lot of my disconnection from my heart and my body that I had been struggling with, and a lot of my disconnection from life, my feelings of I'm living a life that doesn't feel completely mine, that doesn't feel totally authentic, even though it's beautiful, I don't feel like fully here in it. And in God, the universe, like life's own ways of bringing me to my lows, I really came to understand that I had been suppressing and harboring anticipatory grief from these diagnoses of my mom for over 20 years. And it wasn't something that my family really understood at the time of how much it might have affected me at 8 years old, and then later at 17, and then her last diagnosis was at 25 or 27. And so I was basically like brought to my knees in a moment of, I can't live like this anymore. My mom is still alive. My husband is Chilean. We had just moved back to the US after living 6 years in Chile. And I was starting a business that I really loved, but I felt completely like at capacity and unable to move forward. And I knew that I couldn't keep living the way that I was. It was destroying me from the inside out, kind of. I was exhausted and again, just felt really disconnected on a lot of levels and had this sense of this isn't it. This isn't how I'm meant to be living. And yet I don't know what to do. And through beautiful miracles, I met the support people that I needed at the time. And one of the first things that my mentor said to me in that moment of coming together and really beginning our work was, Ellie, this is grief. A lot of what you're dealing with here is grief. And the first time that somebody had ever used that word with me in my story was in that moment. And just like a dam broke, and everything that had been wanting to start to like release out of me, out of my mind, my body, that my soul wanted freedom from and to work through, was beginning to like be able to spill out with this naming of grief. And so grief has kind of called me into work with it on a personal level. And as I have worked through my own journey with coaching, I have really seen that every single person that comes to me that I end up working with, there is grief present, whether they realize it or not. And I kind of felt like in that moment that she said that to me, I was passed a baton of, now you get to be the person that's sacredly holding them in their like beautiful brokenness and their wholeness, gets to say, there's grief here. Let's tend to this and see what wants to happen. And so my journey personally has been what I call like a born through grief journey, a journey where I was like cracked open by life and by originally, and then cracked open again by my mom's death a couple years ago. And in the rebuilding of that, I have found so much return to more aliveness and more vibrancy and more of me that I really see when people are ready, and if it is part of their path, that the journey of meeting grief and meeting ourselves in these broken open moments really can be a transformational path that brings us more into our fullness. And so now I get to do that with other people on multiple levels. And it's really, I'm always humbled to talk about it. It's an honor. And also like, whoa, there's so much there. It's a very potent journey.
Wow. As you were saying, I was having goosebumps all over my body. What a powerful grief portal to experience it for such a long time as a anticipatory grief, and to be there through all of it for your mother. That's a lot. That is a lot. And wow, look at you. Look at you on the other side. Yeah. Wow, beautiful. Well, I celebrate you for it, for sticking through with it, and, committing to your heart and committing to knowing that there is a better life, or not a better, but a joyful and radiant and vibrant experience that we do get to live even with that grief. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I lost my father in 2010. I was very young. I was 23, and I was unequipped to deal with it. There was no support in my life who could offer any guidance at the time. And also, I do believe we each have our own journey, and things are meant to happen as they will for us to walk that path and to remember. And before I started healing my grief, I went through a lot of escapism and self-medicating and throwing myself into work. And eventually it all hit the fan when I felt very disconnected. That's a very common feeling with things like that. I felt disconnected from my life, although I had a quite an exciting life. I had lots of friends, lots of interesting experiences and travels and excitement. And at the same time, there was like this deep well and deep void that was just missing. And my grief manifested as an anxiety in my chest, which that's where grief lives. It lives in our heart, in our lungs. And I did have somebody who pointed it out to me as I was already healing and as I was already, engaging in these different practices and modalities. I did have a body worker, energy worker, who said, well, it lives right here in your chest, and who created that space for me to allow to feel it, to feel the pain, and to allow myself to start actually grieving and processing it and, being with it. So tell me a little bit more about how you guide people and what kind of safe container you create for them to walk through their portal of grief.
Yeah. So much of what you said brought up so many pieces that I wanted to comment on. The first is I absolutely agree with you that everyone has their own path and moment where the like true breaking open to come back to ourselves happens. And I have some people in my orbit that have lost many people, and then they lose one other thing. Maybe it looks small on the outside or it doesn't look as significant of these as other losses. And that is what is the straw that breaks the camel's back. And so we never know. And I don't get to decide. And you don't either, obviously, what is the thing that breaks somebody open. But the important part, I think, is the attunement to that vulnerability that's created and the shackles that are released in that moment, and the asking for support that can come over time. And for me, that was a really messy process. I, of course, at the beginning did not think I needed support, but the moment that I touched into support that I really felt held and seen in, everything started to shift for me. And so my devotion is really to create that for people now. And then you talked about where it lives in our body and how I do absolutely believe that grief is so deeply connected to our heart. It is one of the biggest experiences that can call us back to our heart, I think. And we may not even know that we're not living from the heart or connected to the heart, but grief can really show us that. But in order to like hold the fullness of the heart, the processing of the pain and creating capacity and ability and awareness of our pain and inviting it to be present and knowing how to be present with our pain is a huge, huge, huge part of opening to feeling and living more deeply from all parts of our heart and not just from the pain. And my journey, really, I feel like I went into like an Alice in Wonderland hole of needing to travel underground into myself and bringing up these different areas of pain that had been suppressed for so long and just offering them space again and saying, oh, I can name you here. This is painful. This hurts. And there's a lot here. And then processing the emotions that are attached to that. I feel like little by little, I always say it's like bubbles being popped in your body of like all of the millions. If I had a gumball machine in my body and each little place of pain that I had not brought presence to or not known how to work with, as I met each single one, all of the space started to be liberated in my being for what was my truth and my essence to start to come out. And so when I work with people now, a lot of what I do is guiding us into like sensing into, okay, there's something here. Let's just bring really loving presence and awareness and begin to grow also the person's capacity to meet themselves in those places. Like I get to guide them in doing that at first, and then they start to learn how to meet themselves through what we're doing. And in each little bubble, each little gumball, whatever you want to imagine, we get to just hold it with so much precious love, no need to change it. And as we do that, so much is alchemized and so much shifts. And a lot of the times, tears are very present in my calls with people, but it's like really a liberating sensation. And afterwards, we get to this place of what I call fertile emptiness, where as we've tended the arc of the emotion and really just allowed the emotion to be present and alive and to not need to change and to express through the body if needed, and to speak the words that are often caught in the throat. I almost find like grief can be alive here, but if we're not open or don't have the sense of safety to be able to really let out what wants to come out, we can feel it really stuck in our throats. And so as we're really slowly, like piece by piece, pulling back the layers, attending to each little bubble and gumball that just arises on its own. When you set up a container where you say, all of you is welcome here, including your pain, including your grief, including the parts of you that you are afraid of or that you hate, they will just raise their hands one by one. It's like, okay, my turn. I've been waiting for this for a long time. And as they do, it's just like this beautiful release that happens. And in that release, this fertile emptiness is created, and we can just sit there and let whatever wants to come up and be alive, like what is so natural to us, it gets to just peek through. Like the beautiful little sprout in a garden that you just get to tend. And so the process that I lead people through is really about coming into sacred presence. And I call this whole process sacred tending, liberated expression. And so coming into sacred awareness and presence with whatever's here, guide people into connection with the body, into connection with the greater parts of them, their greater being. And then whatever just raises its hand, we tend to it, we make space for it. And as that happens, one by one, over time, we tap into this well of availability for what is then beyond the pain to start to sprout up. And then we get to tend that as we're like simultaneously tending. So each week it's really fun as we get into, further parts of our path together. We're continuously tending what's still wanting to be released, and we're tending what's wanting to come alive at the same time. And so there's this like beautiful give and take, and this beautiful sense of some weeks might be like a big cathartic release, and some weeks might be like, you know what, for the first time in a long time, I am excited to do this, and I really want to go here, or I really want to do that. Okay, let's do that, and let's explore what's coming alive here. So we fortify those new pieces as we really tend to the sacred release of the old.
I feel like by creating that connection with the body and creating that safety for you to be safe to explore, and knowing that, like you said, all is welcome here, the more we explore one part, the other parts show up and open up and ready. I do believe that we need to create that safety in our body, in our nervous system, for us to fully create that safety for us to express and to feel, and to let those emotions and feelings that are so uncomfortable to guide us, to show us the way out, because the way out is the way through. And you guide people in a container, right?
Yes.
Can you speak a little bit about the importance of having that community and the support of our tribe, of our village in this grieving process?
Yeah, it can feel really lonely. And so the first thing I'll say is just, it's a really lonely feeling path sometimes. And I find that grief is a very individual journey, even if you're also living it alongside of other loved ones. Their experience might be very different from yours. And at the same time, you have a shared experience potentially. And so it's a very individual path. And also the importance of not feeling alone is immense in the ability to stay connected to life, I think. And I operate in two different types of containers. I work one-on-one with people where they're really like high touch, intimate containers where we meet weekly. And the importance of that in the long term is that somebody feels like they can just be in their experience as it is and know that we will get to the rest the next time. And there isn't this sense of I need to figure this out in 2 weeks, or I need to figure this out in a month. Or I do sometimes work in shorter containers just to see what's moving with people. And if people are like really, really hungry to see what's coming alive. But the importance of a container is really the piece of allowing somebody to feel free to take off the expectations and to let what's there be there and trust that there's more happening, and that container's holding them between sessions and throughout sessions. And through that, we will touch into the next, whatever's alive next, the next time. And I really like to imagine all of this as like arcs. I use the word arc a lot recently to describe this because people think that it's a one-off experience, but the energetic reaction and the energetic aspect of it is actually a continuous arc. And so the container is really important to be able to hold somebody in the process of that entire arc and create space for that without it feeling like this is a one-off experience and now I need to move forward, or whatever that the words might be that they might use. And I also have the sanctuary membership, and this is a place where we tend to this exact same process, but in community each week. And we also have something that I call grief flows once a month, which is a very body-led experience with grief, because a lot of times I find that grief is not something that we can put words to. It's alive, and a lot of, not only we've talked about the body, but trying to communicate what we're feeling can be really hard when we're under the weight of it or dancing with the weight of grief. And so I love, and this is something that I discovered when I was like thick in my grieving process at the beginning of my life without my mom, was turning on instrumental music and just like letting my body move the way it wanted to move, and letting it dance with that, with the intention, having like laid the foundation of inviting grief into the space, and letting it move freely. And then in community, being able to come back together and just share what's happening, and like a sacred witnessing circle, and receive support there. And these grief flows move mountains energetically and somatically that we maybe can't do just talking about grief. And I have had people during those processes get up with their headphones on and go change a license plate in a car from a breakup that, you know, they had to buy the car from their old partner and couldn't bring themselves to change the license plate. And all of a sudden in the middle of a song, they're like, okay, I'm ready to do this. And they go change the license plate. I've had people just like feel for the first time grief arriving in their body, and like allowing themselves to feel that, like the range of experience that can happen there, but to be able to come back together and just say, this is what I'm moving with, this is what I'm experiencing. Nothing needs to be changed. Nothing needs to be worked through. This is part of the process. So much moves in that. And so in our weekly sacred tending sessions in the sanctuary, where we're doing a lot of the, like that long arc work, it's also really important for people to feel like they resonate with the experience of another person, even though they're never the same. And to know that they're not alone in their experience offers so much deep support just as they walk out of that space and into life, because it can feel so lonely. So I could say more, but I'll stop there and see what you want to add.
I absolutely love that, because the witnessing part is important, like you mentioned. And for me, I know in my experience that was a very, and is in other ways that I'm always transmuted and transforming, being able to express yourself in whatever way, even if it's not even with words, just with your presence, and be witnessed by others in all your pain or in all your confusion or in all your grief, with no fixing or no ways to figure it out, but just witnessing somebody having a human experience. And we are so different, but we are so similar in the things we feel, in the things that move us through life. We all share so much. And for me personally, in the containers that I've been with, it's a big validation, and not in a way for an ego boost, but for my heart to know I'm not alone in it. And I'm also not alone in my experience. These people right here, they're just as human as I am, just as messy as I am, just as sad, or just as, scared, whatever that feeling is. I think that's a very important part.
That brought up a thought for me of just how important it is for someone to witness somebody else, and how that opens up more compassion for themselves and their own experience. Because we live in a world where grief specifically, but pain in general, is just skipped over. It's like, this happened, now be ready, just move forward, whatever there's so many different ways of saying this, or the fixing aspect of it is really there. And I didn't intentionally try to create a new way, but I feel like part of my work is like creating new consciousness around how to work with this, and the possibility of allowing ourselves to come alive through this process, and allowing ourselves to rebuild through this process. And part of that, and the confidence that can happen there, is through the ability to witness somebody else and say, oh, wow, I know those feelings. Oh, wow, I know that moment. I don't know exactly what it's like for you, but I know that in me. And the compassion and the, to use the word sacred again, the sense of this is a sacred time of my life is regained by being able to witness somebody else in their really broken open moment. And it is extremely vulnerable and brave to do in this world, to let yourself be seen that way. Even just working with me, a lot of people, it takes us a couple weeks to feel, to ground them and to create the safety that you were speaking to earlier, to really feel like they can let their grief be present, because there's a lot that we need to build as a loving foundation there to really be able to trust that it's okay. And a lot of people also have no idea that there is any level of suppression happening, because I do get many people that are like, yeah, I did process this in the moment and I don't feel like I've been suppressing it. And yet, because we live in a world where these expressions are not fully welcome, everybody I find has some level of suppression happening until you get into a space where that's absolutely not necessary anymore, because the world doesn't know how to meet us. Still, we're changing that, but still in that really raw experience. And not only, maybe you can be seen and witnessed there in some places in the world, but then there can be a sense of an emptiness afterwards. Whereas when you're in a space that really can just let you be there and doesn't have an expectation for things to be fixed at the end, I find that it's a fertile emptiness at the other side, not just a sense of aloneness. And the reason that I wanted to create the sanctuary was to be able to build a community where people can step into in these really raw moments. And you may not know the person in your real life because it's virtual, but to be able to have a space where you can truly step in and be in the unraveling and in the rebuilding when it's time, and in the vulnerability of all of that, while being able to like be seen and witnessed and not need to do it yourself. And in that, I think there's just like a part of us that allows a very gentle momentum and processing to happen, because we don't have to be carving out the space for ourselves and then tending every little part of it, to just know that you can step in and be held and like let your freak flag fly in your grief process. And the liberation that comes from that is really wild. In a month minimum, I often see people just be like, whoa, things already feel really different. I know there's a lot still to work with here, but it's so powerful to be witnessed in that way and to know that you have, I think this is another part, whether it be a one-on-one experience or a group experience, to know that you have a place to arrive to. It allows part of your brain and maybe your emotional being to say, we've got this. We don't have to use so much energy in every other moment to tend to it. I know that this place will be able to meet me when I step into it, and that it allows energy to be liberated in other areas where these parts of us don't need to be managed anymore or figured out how to, we don't have to be constantly figuring out how to move with them.
You mentioned the word sacred, and that brings me, I think, what you just said about freeing up the energy to know that this is the space that I have, that I can come again and again and tend to this part of me. And that's good about, creating your own personal practice and space for that, healing a part of you, or just you creating a part of you, or even your sacred ritual for meditation or for whatever it is, for us to create that space and intentionality with it, to know that this is designed for that. And in this space, I am free to express myself. I'm supported here by these people, and all of me is welcome. In life in general, in work that I do with the heart math and, creating that connection with heart, when we do that, we create foundation. So like you said, then we don't need to constantly think about it. We have that foundation and we have that stability in a way. Especially grief can feel very unstable because there is such a range of feelings and emotions. But for you to create that foundation and consistency with yourself opens up that space that you can fill in with your intent and with your feelings and with your emotions and with the work that you do. I love that piece that kind of like clicked for me there a little bit too in my own way.
Yeah. Yeah. Can I add more about the destabilizing part of this?
Absolutely.
I think that there's so many layers to this, and I can talk about it for a long time, so I'll try and be succinct. But I was just with a girlfriend who lost her mom about 7 weeks ago, and we were talking about the arrival of the sense of instability. And it doesn't always arrive right away because shock is super intense, and shock can last, I've learned, much longer than we think that it will. But as that shock starts to wear off, and this is really in any loss, not just the loss of a human, but I think it's extra strong when you've lost somebody that's so connected to you, and like their human body is not there anymore. Destabilization is wild. And on a nervous system level, I think on a soul level, your brain is trying to readjust and figure out what life is again. And on a spiritual level, we can come into questioning of anything and everything all around us and of ourselves. And there is really the potential for full life destabilization, which I think ends up being a weird part of the gift in the long run, if it's something that is the right moment for somebody to reconnect with themselves. But I was really sharing with her that I think that often what's overlooked in our culture, because the long arc of grief or the arc of grief is not given as much space, or we're working on giving it more space in our culture, that is really where the stability is built again, in the confidence of learning how to meet yourself in that destabilized space and like come into the body, come into the heart, and be in the brokenness that is alive there, be in the darkness. I find that so much confidence in being able to meet life in whatever way it might look afterwards is created in meeting yourself moment after moment after moment in the process of the destabilization. And that is slowly what creates the new foundation. And that can take people a long time to get to. It just like everybody is different. It's not really a clear, perfect path. And yet that is such an important piece to be able to live fully and enjoy life fully again and dream into the future when it's time to do that again. Because if we are never able to create that foundation within ourselves, we don't have that stability to take the step out of, I've recently just been reflecting on my multi-year long kind of protection bubble that I've held myself in and how I'm ready to really step out of it. And if I didn't have the foundation that I've built through the process of the last 3 years since my mom died, it was even scary with the foundation that I built. But what made it feel, and what has made it feel less scary, is the sense of, wait, this foundation is coming with me. It's not like I'm stepping out into nothing again. I have created a foundation that will never be detached from me again because it is created here. And I recently you heard me say this on a mentorship call the other day, but I was recently listening to a podcast where they talked about a idea in the Kabbalah, or from some Kabbalah teachers, around when somebody leaves us, their physical body goes, all of the light that they had been kind of pouring into us by being a part of our life also goes back with them. And we really feel the emptiness of the light that's no longer there. And Part of the destabilization, I think, is that we lose like we can feel like part of us is taken with them because of so much that they instilled in us. And part of the grief is also grieving the parts of us that are dying or that are not going to be alive anymore, or that we feel like we've lost with the departure of the other. And so in this big empty cavern of, it's almost like stepping into space. And of course, there's no stability in space. You need, you're bouncing around and you're floating around. And I almost imagine it like part of just the darkness of the universe being alive inside of us, not in the sense of that it's dark, but of that, yeah, we have to lay new groundwork here to be able to stay tethered to life and connected to life. And I really believe through what I've seen that the simple process, it's simple, but it is not easy. The simple process of meeting ourselves week after week, day after day in these processes and learning how to do that, which most people need guidance around that. Maybe for some it's innate, but in my experience, most people need a holding place to learn how to do that. That is really where we recreate the stability. So I love that overlap of your work and the heart work and creating the stability in the heart, and how I think that also happens in these really tremendous broken open moments. It is what calls us again back to that space and to that creation. And that's why I've been in this exploration, and I've been talking about like really finding our light again and letting our light be the foundation. And how when we've been in that kind of dark well that we're just swimming in, it feels like nothingness after the departure or after a loss of some kind, to little by little resurrect the pieces of us and refind and reconnect as we've created space for these little sprouts of life that are truly us to begin to sprout. And like that over time is what creates that foundation. So I think there's just such beautiful overlap with the foundation that you're speaking to in these moments.
Yeah. And as you were speaking, something came to my awareness, is that identity piece that does tie into the foundation too, because foundation is, what creates a stable structure. And when we lose someone, or when we lose a relationship, a job, or when we are experiencing so much loss in our world, it can shake us to the core because of our identity, who we are in relationship to that person, to that job, to that world. For me, I was called into step up in my grief. And I don't want to say step out, because I don't believe we ever step out of grief. But when war in Ukraine, we can speak a little bit about that. But when war in Ukraine happened, there was a big reactivation of a loss, of a trauma. And a lot of it has to do with also like generational, ancestral, what my ancestors lived many times. And in that moment, I became aware, oh, wow, all that work that I've done, grieve the loss of my father, to, reconnect with myself, to learn how to live my joyful life with the pain that stays with me all the time. But all of that created this foundation for me to be like, okay, I know what I'm doing now. Yes, it's not easy, like you said, but I know I have the formula. I know how to navigate this, and I know how to support myself through all of it. And not only support myself in my situation, I got to support my family as well. So we're not only becoming more, creating the foundation, but we are becoming resilient to be able to support ourselves, because life is a constant flow of death and life. And there is always going to be something to grieve. That's just and nature of our life. And we
I
get
love that you
to learn how
spoke
to
to
live.
that. Sorry.
Yeah, and we get to learn how to live with it and through it.
Yeah. I love that you spoke to the piece of the reactivation that the war had for you. And I'm sure there were so many layers, because just being somebody that has left my country and lived in another country before, and also being married to somebody that is currently not living in his country, even if all of the variables are perfect or okay and the circumstances of life support that, there's still so much grief in leaving a homeland and not being close to your people. And so I can imagine that there were so many layers to that. And I think it's so important to name that. The ability to create that resilience and that happens through this foundation and the rebuilding is exactly as you said. The sense of, I know that I can meet what comes my way, even if it's not what I would choose, or even if it's not what I want, or even if it's not how I imagined it. A lot of times, I think it's overlooked, the grief that can exist just in desiring something to be some way and not having control over how it goes and life going differently. And the sense of, this isn't what I wanted. This isn't how I wanted it to be. And that, I think, exists for every person on the planet. I don't think it's just for somebody that has lost somebody. But that is a very important piece to being able to build that resilience. As you said, is like, I know how to meet the grief that, for example, I'll share very personally for me. I'm thinking about motherhood and becoming a mother. And doing that without my mom is so, like, it's so big. There's so much emotion. And for a long time, I was just so afraid to even let myself think about it, because I realized recently that the moment that I embark with intention on that path, I am letting the rawness of the grief back in, maybe for every day of my life. You know, I don't know what it will be like. There's so much unknown in just choosing life again and choosing to experience something, whether it be without somebody or whether it be just in the circumstance of how life is so much different now than how we thought it would be. And the rawness of that at first really paralyzed me. And I had to, like, my body still remembers how overwhelming that is. And after just a few days of being with it, and pretty immediately, but really after a few days of being with it and understanding, like, yeah, of course I've been protecting myself from this because there's a big unknown here. What will this be like? I don't know. It could be that, you know, the grief is so right in my face every day that I could never look away again. And it's kind of it's kind of funny because it's not like I've looked away from grief any moment since she passed away. But, and I think that's a great thing to talk about together. But feeling how alive it might be again after feeling like I am stable, at first took me by surprise, and then offered this greater knowing and this greater part of me to come in and just remember. But you know how to meet it. You know how to make space for it. You know that you can still have the most beautiful day of your life and let grief be part of it too. You know that you can be dancing in your kitchen like this past year on Valentine's Day. Valentine's Day was just a few days before my mom passed away, and it was a very, very, very intense death portal the last month before she died. And I have so many really intense memories from the days around Valentine's Day that just come alive at that time. And this year I was making a dinner for us, dancing in my kitchen, having the best time, and then had this memory come up and just had to go sit on the couch and cry for 25 minutes and just hold my hand to my heart and say, yeah, Mom, I miss you. This sucks. And I wish I could call you and tell you happy Valentine's Day. And I wish you could send me the socks and underwear and chocolate that you used to send me every year, and really allowing that to be there. And then taking some breaths and getting a hug from my husband, and then really enjoying the food that was created and having a really evening full of laughter again while watching a stupid movie. So I was reminded again, and I think that the parts of us that know grief so viscerally sometimes can react really quickly when there's the opportunity to live again or to be present with it again. We react so viscerally because it is known in the body, and maybe not for everybody, but for me, I have been taking off the layers of that grief that has existed since I was 8 for 7 years. And I think there's still a lot more to go. So it's not like magically all dispelled or, dissolved. But after that initial reaction or that initial clenching or contraction, when we have built the foundation, when we have built the relationship, when we have built the resilience, there's a greater part of us that goes, you don't need to worry. You know how to do this. You know how to meet this moment. You know how to experience everything that is alive here right now. And what more could you ask for? And that has grounded me, and I think grounds my clients. I notice there's somebody that I've been working with for a long time who's about to take a really big step into life. And there is these days where there's a part of her that's like, and then every time we just sink into it, there's but this is different now. We have to go through that constant process of updating and remembering, like, wait, we have created what's necessary so that we can live in fullness, in relationship and engagement to fullness. And I think so many times fullness is romanticized as, and I have done this a lot myself, so I'm calling myself out or calling everybody else into, of what fullness is. And maybe it's been romanticized as like, a flashy, luxurious life or lots of money, all of those things, whatever you determine as fullness, like all of that's probably true. And yet there's this whole other part that you can invite in along with it. And it doesn't need to be just the glamorized part or living in the parts that feel deep and overwhelming sometimes. That doesn't need to take away from that other fullness. It actually just makes it like feel so complete and alive. That is when I feel most alive. Being able to live into all of it at once. And I really find that as you create foundation, I'm trying to make a easy to understand image because I don't really have words for this, but as you create that foundation and your capacity slowly starts to expand again, it expands like this. It is a 360 expansion that happens. And so the parts of your emotional capability and ability to really be with what's coming up there expands at the same time that your ability to marvel at the beautiful trees on your walk expands, and your ability to relate to other people and bring more of yourself to a conversation and be in your authentic flow, as I call it, and expression outwardly expands at the same time that, you are able to meet yourself over and over and over again in those really intimate moments. And so, yes, learning to live happens. It's like we relearn to live again through this, but if we have, the foundation, we get to relearn to live into all of it with the confidence that we can meet all of it. And it's okay to forget about that confidence, but as soon as you forget, you will remember.
Thank you. That is absolutely beautiful. And thank you for being so vulnerable. I felt for you about dancing one moment and then, feeling the heart-shattering feeling of grief and being with it all at the same time. And one doesn't exclude the other. That fullness that you spoke of there is such a spectrum of human emotion. The deeper you allow yourself to feel that grief and sadness and sorrow, the more profound the joy becomes. And the more you allow yourself to fall apart and to let your heart break and shatter, the more love there is in your heart. It's a paradox of being human. And there is such a depth to it and such a lightfulness to it too, because it doesn't have to be, oh, this is how it's supposed to be, and this is how I'm supposed to grieve and to live my life and to grieve and to... No, it can be messy and it can be light, and there is still room for joy and room for you to feel the sadness that a loss of a loved one brings, or any sadness or sorrow around grief. Grief is a very complex term, but it's a beautiful, beautiful realization to come to.
Love that you said there's so much depth and also lightfulness in it. And yes, to that. There is so much depth. A lot of the times I like to use the imagery of an infinity sign with my clients, that kind of infinity signs are normally horizontal. I'm trying to think if that's different than normal, but it doesn't really matter what direction it's in. But this sense of this depthfulness and this light and the dance of those, that is like infinity alive within us. And as we are working with our ability to move into all parts of the sign, we activate, it's a mirror of each other. And so maybe for a while, we're just living, if this is the light part, we're just living in this part of it. And then we get catapulted into deepening into it. And sometimes it can feel like you're just circling around only in the dark at the beginning. But you don't know that you are expanding your ability to be able to complete the entire infinity sign in your day-to-day life and in the fullness of your life as well, as you expand into the dark side, or let yourself go into that. And there are seasons where it might feel like you are operating only in one, and especially in the beginning, it may feel like you're just going around in circles in the same place. But in my experience, it's impossible that it's not amplifying and opening up what you can move into over time on the other side as well.
And it's not a linear process either. Things happen, and the more we allow ourselves to feel it, the more pain can come up and take us back into the process. And I think that's a very important part for people to remember, that it also isn't a time frame where, oh, in 5 years you'll be good to, no, the people that we lost, our parents, they live with us. And for as long as I live, the memories fade. I'll be honest. And that's another grief there too, that comes with that, realizing, oh, I'm forgetting things. But the essence of who they were in our lives stays with us. So the grieving and the sorrow will always be there with us.
Yeah. There's some of the grief that's most surprised me. And that is the grief that I don't feel my grief the same way that I did a year, 2 years ago. The moments where I think I'm forgetting my mom, and then I close my eyes and she's just right back there again, are some of the most intense moments, but also that I am so grateful for. Like, I always just hear her when I ask, where are you? Just, I'm right here, sweetie. I'm right here. And then I try and imagine her in my mind, and immediately she comes back. But there are these moments where I do feel like I'm forgetting, or I do forget for a little while. And there's also some of the most incredibly strange feeling grief moments for me, is something that I did not ever hear anybody talk about. Although I think you just don't really know what somebody's talking about until you experience it as well. And so I didn't understand this, but the grief that I am who I am now, which I love, and I'm so thrilled to be living into and exploring more, and that she's not here to be who I am now with. And also the weirdness of, for my mom, in a sense of, this is different in our stories, but my mom was in a diseased state for the last, especially the last few years of her life. There were many ups and downs. And that created, in our own defense mechanisms of wanting to love each other and protect ourselves from the pain, it created limitation in our relationship. And the fact that and the cancer, really more the cancer, not her, but the cancer is no longer existing in my life anymore. That has given me a freedom to be able to explore and become in a way that I really came up against before. And there's so much pain in that. Like, how could I feel so much liberation from my mom not being here, but not because it's her not here, but because the cancer that was living inside of her is no longer a part of my life anymore. It has gifted me so much. It has really been a process of wow, these are things that I can do now because that's not here. But that also means that my mom is not here to live into this part of life with me. And it is, it's just like my brain can't even fully comprehend it. It is so wild, so multidimensional.
Yeah. I feel like we've talked about so much. I want to pause I think we've given the audience enough.
Yeah. Okay.
And I don't know if I'm going to leave this part because it might be too long, but I do want to mention. And then you said, being liberated of something that caused your mom's death. And it's that polarity of having that happiness around it and at the same time sadness around it, and the multidimensionality of grief also in the way that now you get to live your life and have this beautiful family and have this beautiful expression of who you are, Ellie Flow, all because of the grief and the loss that you've experienced. Again, that balancing of both and holding of both. And then for me, a big part now, it's been, I don't know how many, 2010, so 13 years since my father transitioned, but he doesn't know this version of me, and I feel very sad about that. And at the same time, I have the faith that I've developed through to know that, oh no, he knows all of versions of me. He's always here with me. And that gives me comfort.
Yeah.
And that gives me a reassurance knowing that, the physical form is not all of it. To have that connection with my father beyond the physical form and have that connection with, for me, was a big part of healing because it gave me reassurance that he's still here. His body might not be, but he's still here.
And you probably accessed him through your
my
greater
heart.
spiritual heart.
Absolutely, yeah. In the heart that holds all of us.
Yes.
Beyond time and space and the physical form. The heart that holds all memories that my mind may be forgetting.
Yes.
But the way he made me feel is still in my heart. And his essence, who he was as a person, that's all here in me.
And this is not for today because it would be adding 5,000 more minutes of rabbit hole exploration. But I believe that when we follow the path of this journey of the grief and heart opening, the grief and heart connected living and journey, that everything behind us is being healed. Everything in our lineage is being healed. on so many layers, and that through that, I almost imagine sometimes my mom just seeing who I am now and being like, you're doing it, sweetie. And I just love that. I love watching this. I feel like she loves watching the healing that's not only happening, has happened and continues to happen in me, but the way that that's transcending backwards and forwards and laterally in time and impacting everyone. And it's such a powerful and honorable journey.
Yeah. There is a lot of personal power that comes with fully stepping into grief and allowing it to be your friend and allowing it to be a part of your life, a part of who you are. It affected in more ways than one. It not only broke our heart, but it healed our heart.
Beautifully said. Yes.
I'm not grateful for losing my father. Of course I'm not, but I'm grateful for the experience and the journey that gave me. There's a lot of paradox in that, but that's just who we are, right?
Yes, so real. I love the way you said that. I love the idea that it and the truth that it healed our heart or broke our heart and healed our heart. Wow. I never put those words to that, and that is so alive. Yes.
Thank you so much. This was such a heart-opening conversation. Grief is not something you can talk to anyone about, especially grief of losing a parent. Not everybody relates to that. I mean, we are very young, so most of my friends still have both of their parents. And I know they've experienced their own grief and other things. And it was so beautiful to talk with you about it and to hear your journey and how you're now guiding and supporting others in theirs. Any final messages, shares, reflections, or anything that you want to leave the audience with?
I feel incredibly touched and honored and grateful to have this conversation with you. I'm always brought back alive in the importance of being able to share this path and these experiences with more and more people, and to be able to, as you said, speak to someone who has their own version of a parallel loss is incredibly welcoming to me. It feels like it welcomes in me again. It welcomes in anybody that might have lost someone or might be in that anticipatory season and wondering, I want to say to that person, there's nothing you can do to prepare. Just be as present as you can, build presence, and what comes afterwards will come. We can't control that part. And in general, I guess I just want to say to anybody that is in the thick of that darkness, whether it be from grief or from any other part, that there is a space for you. And as you are welcomed in to just be as you are, so much can be born from you and through you in perfect timing. And there's no rush. And it's really hard to trust those moments. I know that I really was challenged in trusting the deep void moments. And I also now know on the other side, or, I still go into voids, but none of them are quite like that one for me so far. There's so much medicine alive in honoring your rhythms and honoring what's happening in you, and finding the spaces that you can feel connected and supported. So I just honor you, Tetiana. Thank you so much. I feel like we could go down the universes of exploration on this for 5 more hours, and maybe we will again, but thank you for having me and creating the space for this conversation.
Thank you so much.